Whatever your views about Narendra Modi's politics, one remarkable aspect of his prime ministership has been the outreach to the Muslim world. No Indian prime minister in recent times has visited so many Middle Eastern and Arab countries. Everywhere Modi goes, he's received warmly, he hugs his hosts, they hug him back, and it seems to be working. I think the hosts are also conscious that other Indian prime ministers have not done this. Last week, Modi went to Kuwait. He was the first Indian prime minister in 43 years to go. Before that, he went to the UAE. He was the first Indian prime minister in 30 years. Now, these countries are important to us, not just in geopolitical terms, which of course they are, but they're important because so many Indians live there. So it's important for us to have a relationship in countries where our people are settled. Now, apart from that, apart from the fact that it's important and Modi's taken the trouble, there are some other very remarkable things. The first is this whole Israel conflict at the moment. India has traditionally been pro-Palestine. We didn't recognize Israel for a long time. They were only allowed a small consulate in Bombay. Eventually, they were recognized and given an embassy in Delhi. But the perception generally has been that India is on the side of the Palestinians. Under Modi, that perception has reversed almost. While the government says it's playing an even keel, the BJP supporters are very clearly pro-Israel and not really pro-Palestinian. Modi himself is a friend of Netanyahu's. He gets Netanyahu to sell him Pegasus and other kinds of technology. So our relations with Israel have never been stronger than they are at the moment. Now, not all Arab countries, whatever they may say in public, are pro-Palestine. They're certainly not pro-Hamas. But even so, there is so much revulsion in the Middle East over the Israeli bombing of civilian targets in Gaza that you might think that the fact that we've improved relations with Israel to this extent might be a factor. But no, it doesn't. It seems to have made no difference, and Modi has been able to make these inroads into the Muslim world. There's a second and more obvious factor that should work against this. Modi has this image of being a Hindu leader. He's called a Hindu extremist, a Hindu fundamentalist, all kinds of things. A Hindu nationalist is probably the most acceptable version. And there's no doubt that many of his supporters espouse extremist Hindu views. It's also clear that many BJP state governments, if not the central government, have acted against Muslims. So there is a great level of dissatisfaction among India's Muslims about Modi's tenure. And because they are so anti-Modi, they look to the Islamic world for support. They believe that the world's Muslims, seeing how India's Muslims are being treated, will have some sympathy and will perhaps treat Modi differently. Well, guess what? They're completely wrong. The one thing we've learned in the 10 years of Modi is that Muslims in other countries, certainly Muslim governments, Muslim rulers, don't really worry too much about how Indian Muslims are treated. As far as they're concerned, it's an internal affair of India. They will deal with Modi, they will deal with India, an important regional superpower. This upsets Indian Muslims because they say, surely there is some kind of Islamic brotherhood. Well, no, there isn't. What there is some kind of Islamic belief. So, if somebody in India says something that's against the Prophet, against the religion, then yes, Muslim governments in Arab countries get very upset. This happened with Nupur Sharma when she made offensive remarks on a television channel. And Modi and his government responded immediately. Even though she was a BJP spokesperson, they threw her under the bus. They apologized. They said she was a fringe element, which is an interesting way to describe your own spokesperson, and basically just disowned her completely. They were attacked within India. They were attacked by BJP supporters. Nupur Sharma got a lot of support from the Sangh faithful. It made no difference. She remained under the bus as far as they were concerned. So that's the nature of Modi's relationship with the Islamic world. And yet, there are things about this relationship, this bonhomie between Modi and the sheikhs, that intrigue me. The first is the attitude of Modi's own supporters. If you listen to them, Muslims, and particularly Muslims from the Middle East and North Africa, are Muslims who came into India, damaged Hinduism, looted our temples, tried their best to get rid of Hinduism, suppress our people, oppress our people. And they say, even though that was in history, we must make people of this generation pay for those sins because they are historical sins. So Indian Muslims are paying the price. And they also say that Muslims in the Middle East are financing jihad in India, that so many Indian Muslims have contacts with them, that millions are coming into India to convert Hindus, to turn them towards Islam. This is a fairly common narrative among Hindutva supporters. And yet, when Modi goes to Arabia and he hugs these same people who've allegedly done all of these things, there is no problem at all. In fact, these same people go on social media and say Modi got such and such award from such and such Muslim country, or he was received at the airport by such and such sheikh. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? When Modi hugs these people who his supporters are attacking most of the time, everything changes. It's like they're wonderful people. They've honored our prime minister. They love the hugs. It's really a jadoo ki jhappi as far as they're concerned. That I find odd. There's another aspect of the whole thing that I find very odd, which is that we keep hearing about Muslims wanting to oppress Hindus. We keep hearing about Hindu phobia, about Hindu victimhood. And yet, many, many Hindus have chosen to go and live in the Arab world in the Middle East. They have gone voluntarily. They seem quite happy over there. They're not making any attempt to come back. And each year, many more go to join them. If there is this notion of Hindu victimhood, and if Muslims are such villains, how come so many Hindus are going there? How come so many Hindus seem so happy and are not willing to come back? One response is that they're going only because, things are bad in India and there are economic opportunities. Well, first of all, after 10 years of Modi, if you're still saying that, there's something wrong with the way he's running the country. And secondly, if they're really being treated so badly, then why doesn't Modi raise it with his hosts? It doesn't come up. I'll tell you why he doesn't raise it. He doesn't raise it because they're not being treated badly, because there is no sense of Hindu victimhood there. They are actually quite happy. Unless somebody tells you that these are just poor people, laborers, they're not. Every week, lakhs of billionaires from India pack their suitcases, move to Dubai. So if rich and poor can go to the Middle East voluntarily, live in those countries, make good livings, and seem happy, where is the Hindu victimhood? And yet it's there. You have notions of Hindu victimhood in nearly everything these people say. You find it particularly when they talk about Muslims and Hindus in India. They talk repeatedly about how Hindus must assert their rights in India because they're being denied what is their own. Really? If you're going to say that Hindus can go to Muslim countries, live as a minority, and not really suffer any kind of discrimination, judging by the hugs the Prime Minister gives the leaders of that country and the way in which he's lauded for it by his supporters. Are you going to say that there's Hindu victimhood in India where 85% of the population is Hindu? Does that even make any sense? It's a strange narrative. It's an old narrative that dates back to the 1980s, and it was created by L.K. Advani to win votes for the BJP. And it made a certain amount of sense to people of that mentality because, let's face it, the Congress was dealing with the most backward and regressive elements in the Muslim clergy. People like VP Singh were going and asking for fatwas from dodgy imams in their favor. So there was a sense in which Hindus had a right to feel that the Congress was putting the interests of regressive Muslim people ahead of ordinary Muslims and ordinary Hindus. But that's not true any longer. 10 years after Modi has taken office, can anyone really claim that there's any pampering of Muslims? And yet people do. They say that, Muslims are pampered in India. They're a special religion. They're given a special place. Yeah. When their houses are being demolished by bulldozers in Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, how are they being pampered? Modi doesn't raise all this stuff because I think he's brighter than the people who follow him. He knows that this is a political stunt, it's rhetoric. He knows that there are Hindu-Muslim tensions, but that nobody is oppressing Hindus. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I think that even the people who say that there's a need for a Hindu revival because Hindus are being oppressed don't really believe it either. Then why do they say it? Well, because it's easier to say my political views are determined by the oppression of Hindus, then it is to tell the truth. And the truth is, much of this comes from some visceral, primeval, primitive hatred of Muslims. It's that's dressed up and made to sound like a political ideology or a political slogan. Of course, Hindus are not being oppressed, not in the Middle East and not in India. And the person who's shown us that he knows that is Narendra Modi.